Welcome to the Creating Connections podcast, where I bring voices and perspectives from people who are making a difference for children's learning and development. I'm Rachel Stewart, and I'm passionate about connecting with people to share experiences and learn from each other how we can best support children to thrive. In this series of the podcast, I interview successful leaders in education so you can learn from a diverse range of people what makes a successful leader and how you can take their learnings and apply them to your teaching and leadership. Today, I'm introducing you to Alex Box. Alex is an experienced teacher, learning specialist, and maths tutor. As a formerly maths anxious student herself, Alex brings important perspectives to conversations about maths teaching and learning. Alex mentors teachers, students, and families and consults to various organisations and schools. She is the founder of Maths Play, a community research project providing outreach to families, teachers, and schools. Together during this interview, we discuss her passion for supporting students with maths by sharing her knowledge and experience through play-based maths concepts and community-based programs. I'm sure you'll enjoy this delightful interview with Alex Box on the podcast today. Well, thanks for joining me on the podcast today. It's a pleasure to finally speak to you because we've been trying to connect for a while, because I really want to talk to you all things maths. Now, I have to admit that maths was never my strength at school, and I always struggled with it. And I think that maths teachers particularly have a huge role in encouraging children who are perhaps struggling in maths to keep trying and to use different strategies to be able to understand maths. But my own experience, I had a teacher in year 4 who was quite scary and put me off maths pretty much for life, which was quite sad because I think that if she had taken the time to help me with different strategies in the way that I learn, because we know all children learn differently, then things could have been a bit different, I think. But I'm really interested to hear your perspective on maths and how maths should be taught, how it's being taught, and why children, so many children, are actually struggling with maths. But perhaps we can start with your story and hear where you started in education and how it's led into being a specialist in the maths space.
Sure, and it might be a bit of a long answer, but
Okay.
feel free, if I'm taking a breath, feel free to, chime in if you sort of want to get me on track. But there are like a few key milestones that feel really important, and one of them actually goes back to my school experience as well, because I
Yeah.
think what you mentioned is just so common. I don't think that traditional or industrial model of maths education where we are all sitting at our desks on our own, kind of that solitary experience, that competitive experience. I'm not sure about you, but we didn't have very overt ranking systems when I was in primary school, but you knew who the smart kids were and who was being given a challenge and being treated differently. Kids pick up on that stuff and we internalize it, and we carry that with us. So yeah, happy to might start around secondary school, just because there's one really important milestone that I have to keep in my mind. It guides me, and that it really speaks to the broken nature of the maths education system. At least when I was graduating high school. I don't spend a lot of time in secondary schools now. I have a lot of friends who are maths secondary teachers who tell me what they're doing, and I'm in awe. So I like to think that that's not so uncommon to have a really positive maths experience in high school. But what happened for me was I disengaged from mathematics probably in about year 8 or 9, and I just did not want to go to class at all. It was my least favorite subject. And then I think it was year 10 where I had a teacher who, interestingly, I don't know if his teaching style really suited the way my brain works, but how he got me in was he made a joke one day that I got, and I thought it was really funny. And no, I don't think anyone else really noticed. And I just it was like this moment of connection where we connected over comedy or humor. And from that moment, I was like, oh, I just instantly I had some respect for this teacher because he could make a funny joke. And
Yeah.
then and from that moment, I was sort of paying attention. I was going to the out of hours, like asking questions. So sometimes it can be a very simple thing that can win a student enough to at least put in a little bit more effort. And so that is a lesson that I've carried with me.
Yeah, there's
Um,
not enough humor in maths, I don't think.
Totally, totally. You know,
There
I'm
should
quite a
be more humor in it.
Absolutely. And you know, I working on a project at the moment with some other teachers, and we're coming up with like 6 pillars for our maths education. I'm getting a bit off topic, but comedy is one of them. So I just throw that in. Um,
Great.
yeah, but so year 10 I sort of re-engaged, and then I was encouraged by, you know, the teacher and also my parents to pursue maths at VCE level. So here in Victoria, that's the certificate that we have. And I did actually really well in inverted commas in VCE maths methods, which at the time was sort of arbitrarily and unhelpfully known in our community as smart maths.
Yes.
Um, so at age
For the
17,
nerds, apparently.
yeah, right.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think, and then a lot of my friends were doing veggie maths, and you know, I look at again in inverted commas, and I look at what is in those general and further math subjects, and I think, you know what, I think some of that data stuff and there were things that we never really did in year 12, and I think that probably would have helped me a little bit more in my actual life than some of the things I learned in maths methods. So, but that's just like a side note. So at age, yeah, 17, I was 17 in year 12. I did very well in maths. And as often happens at this school age, you know, the adults around me have my best interests in mind, you know, like what are you going to do at uni, all of that. And so the suggestion came up that maybe I might be interested in becoming a maths teacher because we were experiencing a shortage of maths teachers then too.
Yeah.
So it wasn't my first preference, but I did get into science education, a double degree at Monash Uni, and I enrolled in first year maths with this in mind that maybe I could be a maths and science teacher because I quite enjoyed biology, and I enjoyed psychology at high school. So yeah, and you know, I didn't really know. I mean, I knew I was going to go into teaching, but I just had that in my mind that, you know, maths is important because there'll be jobs, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember going to the maths class and I just did not know what was going on. Like it was just a completely different experience to the school experience.
Mhm.
It's like a completely different mathematics.
Yeah.
And there was a friend actually from my school taking the same math subject as part of his engineering degree, and he was fine. Like he just sort of seemed to smoothly transition in. And I tried to get his help a little bit with homework and stuff. And I can't really remember if I felt comfortable approaching the teachers because I do remember feeling really out of my depth at university.
Yeah.
Um, but I couldn't grasp any of the subjects, any of the maths concepts. I remember it was just really different to school maths. And looking back, I know now what I know about mathematics, what it is, what's important when we're learning it, that at university it was deeply conceptual and it was deeply creative. And that wasn't an experience that I'd had. You know, so getting through school, I guess, you know, I largely learned my way to performing well on assessments and exams, and then, you know, forgetting it, having to re-study in order to remember how to solve certain things. And in that first year at uni where I encountered real maths, I just lost all confidence. And I made myself study because I was very conscientious. I made myself study a subject that I felt hopeless in. And each time I did that, I only felt more hopeless after each session. And so ultimately, I failed university maths. Didn't do that well in biology either. It was similar in that it seemed to be a lot harder, like just a huge jump from high school. Did okay in psychology and the education subjects, but by the end of that first university year, I was just completely burned out. I needed to take a year off, and you know, and I did that and ended up going back up to uni a year later to do an arts degree. So yeah, completely the other way, which I absolutely loved, and ended up majoring in and minoring in languages, which opened up some wonderful intercultural opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of getting to teaching and getting to maths, so while I was doing the Bachelor of Arts, I was also working to support myself. And one day I happened to be visiting my old primary school, so the one I went to as a child, to interview the principal about their Sun Smart program of all things. This was for a uni assignment. And at the end of the interview, Robin, the principal, asked if I'd be interested in up to 10 hours a week working as an integration aide. It would be flexible hours, I could fit it around my studies. And I'd had a history of netball coaching, babysitting, tutoring, all of which I really loved. And so the idea of getting paid to help out in a school was perfect for me, and much more interesting than pulling beers and clearing out slot machines, which was my main job at the time. So yeah, and I loved that, and I loved being a part of the school community. And so a couple of years later, I was enrolled at Charles Darwin University doing the dip ed, so that and then the rest is history, really. I picked up a classroom job the following year, and had a number of wonderful, professionally rich years working in a school in Melbourne's East, working in public education. I was never really anyone to seek leadership roles. I was already like so focused on the things that were happening in my classroom that somehow leadership roles sort of just kept finding their way into my portfolio, which, ha has its pros and cons. The main con being just an unsustainable workload, when you're leading
Yes.
programs and trying to teach at the same time and respond to all of the little spot fires that are happening each day. Um, but yeah, I obviously I learned a lot from those roles,
Yeah.
because, if I'm given a responsibility, I will want to do it justice or else not at all. I've never really been one to do things by halves. So, yeah, for a few years, I was the East Smart Schools coordinator. That was kind of a random gig. But it ended up being, yeah, quite good. It was a big job, and it was like all about introducing programs for students, families, and teachers around the smart, safe, and responsible use of digital technology and the internet. It was a fantastic program that came out of the Alana and Madeline Foundation.
Yeah.
So really a wellbeing program in a digital world.
Yeah.
That was really great learning, and I carry a lot of the ideas from that with me today, because one of the big things about that is really celebrating and utilizing technology. And, in the math space, we're doing that a lot with coding and other tools. So being aware of what's really helpful, and then like also building healthy habits around technology. The other really probably noteworthy experience or leadership experience I had, which carries with me today, is through the implementation of the new pedagogies for deep learning. So this was a project, like a global professional learning project for teachers all around the world. I think there might have been, I might be getting this wrong, but maybe 80 countries involved in this. And
Okay.
Victoria was one of the communities involved. And so we had these wonderful opportunities to learn more about project-based learning, challenge-based learning, higher order thinking, and how to integrate these kinds of things into our everyday classroom practice. And so it was great. It equipped us to co-design projects with students. So the kids were involved in deciding what we were going to work on as a project. So they were shaping it. So student voice and agency and ownership was
Yeah.
really an important part of that. And we, the teachers, were in charge of bending the core curriculum. So, our English, our maths, our humanities, our science are into those projects. So, for instance, we've got to cover things in English and maths. We could do that through projects like students creating customized picture storybooks for a particular community, or for their buddy, whatever. Often there was an audience involved, not always, but there was always some sort of reason, like something to work towards, where when we were learning maths and English concepts, we were then applying them to our project. So it gave us a reason to learn the skills and things that were in the curriculum, so that we could then apply them. Like one lovely maths example that it's probably one of my favorites was, we had a fundraising market day, and the students worked in groups to work out what they were going to be selling on their stall. And some were selling made things like bookmarks, and others were selling an opportunity to play a game, like throw a ball 3 times, and if you get it in the net, you get point. So it was like this fun market day. But in order to successfully run their market stall, the students need to be able to add up totals and calculate change and things like that. So they needed to have those skills so that they could do it on the fly. So we had this authentic reason to develop fluency with certain facts. And so this was really that was a really important opportunity, the new pedagogies for deep learning, or NPDL for short, because we really learned how to integrate all of that stuff together, and we were connected with people around the world who were doing the same thing as well. So I often think of that as one of those meaningful maths examples in the work that I'm doing today.
Yeah,
Um,
that design thinking, bringing design thinking into schooling, into education has been one of the best things that has happened, I think, in the last 20 years. I experienced it with my kids when they went through school, and just to see them working on project-based STEM projects and to see how they became very independent learners and to be able to think creatively and critically and all of those things. And I think that, yeah, I mean, it teaches you life skills and it teaches kids the relevance of maths and science and all the different subjects they're learning at school. It teaches them the relevance of why they're actually learning it. Um, but it's interesting in your intro, there were two words that stood out to me. And it sounds like you've come full circle because you've started off with an ordinary experience like I did in maths. And then you've moved into maths and really, yeah, really struggled at university and turned your back on it for a while and went into the humanities and then you've sort of come full circle and now you're so passionate about maths. But two words that stood out to me were perceptions and confidence when it comes to maths, because perceptions can stop us from having confidence in actually being able to solve the problems and see the patterns and actually learn to love maths. How do you think that that is holding so many students back in schools in actually exploring how to overcome those self feelings of self-doubt if you make mistakes, how to overcome those sorts of things, that barriers that hold you back in actually being good at maths?
It is a really big question. It's like a can of worms, but it is such an important one and one I think about all of the time. And, we have all kinds of social challenges when it comes to mathematics. We have these social narratives that are perpetuated or reinforced through even like every now and then I'm driving the car and I hear on the radio, the throwaway line of, oh, well, I'm not a maths person, or whoever the radio presenter is. And so we have this deeply entrenched belief that as a culture, society, that there are maths people and non-maths people still, even though the science has been out for however many years that the brain science is out, and there are lots of people working in this space like me, trying to help people see that everyone is mathematical. But I know the pain of that journey because I've come along that journey as well, and I think
Yeah.
it's actually it's. I think I've noticed that it's really serendipitous. Like it's serendipitous. You either get a maths teacher who helps you see that you're mathematical, or you don't, or you're born into a family of people who've had positive maths experiences and they can pass it on to you, or you're not. So it's, for me, my serendipitous moment, like even though I had these great opportunities through the MPDL integrating maths, and that was I think that's what made it okay for me. Like it made me feel that I could be a successful teacher in mathematics because I could integrate it into projects. But
Mm.
at that stage, I had actually never seen a class in action which was just about learning maths for its own sake and enjoying the process. I had never seen that. I'd never experienced it. I was just always doing my best to reach all of the, meet all the needs of all of the students in my class. And that ended up being a huge amount of work in mathematics because I felt like I had to prepare lots of different, activities some of the time. I mean, it was just looking back, ridiculous the amount of work that was spent on preparing one maths lesson.
To suit all different learning styles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But that's
So,
dedication.
yeah, well, it also, I think, I do think that the maths part is probably part of the reason why I burned out again was I was spending so much time and I had so much anxiety around meeting the needs of every student across every learning area, especially mathematics, because mathematics was the one that we were all worried about. So, but yeah, just in terms of coming back to your question about perceptions and things, I mean, I ran a session last week for parents and guardians of Year 5 and 6 students, and we went through four or five different principles of what inclusive or kind mathematics involves, like guiding principles or features, if you like. And one of the things I would say, which has been transformative for shifting my own perception of myself and also of students and families that I work with, is first of all, that mathematics is visual and it is concrete. All of the maths that we learn has been created to explain something that we've observed or that a mathematician or a group of mathematicians has been observing or looking at. We are pattern noticers, we are pattern seekers, and we are pattern enjoyers. And those of us who have vision, that we usually see that, like, that's what we see. We can hear patterns as well in music and conversations and things like that. We can feel patterns as well, but that visual and concrete nature of mathematics is is probably one of the most transformative things for me. And there's a bit of neuroscience which I love, which says that tells us that when we are thinking mathematically or looking at a maths problem and like trying to make sense of it, there are 5 areas of our brain that light up, and 2 of them are visual processing centers. So if we don't have any kind of visual grounding or visual access to visual mathematics, whether it's in the question itself or as foundations for us going into a more abstract question, then our whole maths brain actually can't really access the maths. I mean, and it's that simple.
Yeah.
So that's like one of the first things that I talk about with new families or when I'm going into classrooms or working with teachers, and we usually look at a maths visual together. Something really mathematically rich but real. Like there's a painting on a wall which has lots of squares involved and colors and a bit of pattern going on, and that's one of my favorite ones to use. And we all look at it and we think about, what do we notice, what do we wonder, and we start broad. Everyone has an answer to that question. It's not asking us how many squares where there's only one answer, but what do we notice, what do we wonder? And we're able to make all of these mathematical connections between geometry, number because of square numbers, multiplication, fractions, wonderings about, if we moved the squares around, could we make it into a symmetrical design? Because currently it's asymmetrical. So having these opportunities to, yeah, really see and discuss and mentally play with mathematics is, I think, one of the best things we can do for helping to shift those perceptions. That
Yeah, I love that. I love how you bring creativity into maths because it's true. You either think you're of that side of the brain, being creative, enjoying the, writing or literacy, the arts, or you're a maths brain, like you said, or a maths and science person.
yeah,
But to overcome that barrier, that bridge between the two of them, to actually look at maths in a different way, in a different through a different lens is, yeah, it's so important. And I love that you're actually working with parents, because how important is it for parents to understand how we learn maths or how their children learn maths, and how to bring the fun in and the creativity into maths to help their children overcome those barriers.
yeah, absolutely. And if we don't provide these opportunities to family, I mean, family adults are they're the main educator. They're the educator that's there throughout their children's life. And teachers come and go, and you sort of get lucky, and you get lucky, you get one that really loves mathematics and can instill that nurture. And I also just want to quickly say that, I don't, I really understand the feeling of not loving teaching maths, like it being the pain point, because I've been there where it's been the pain point, the stress point. And
Yeah.
I just didn't have the tools and knowledge in my toolkit to teach in any other way, because that was my experience. I had a very, you know, solitary worksheet based maths experience. And so, uh, you know, this is part of what we're doing with community outreach. We're not just reaching out to families, but also teachers as well, and sometimes bringing them together in one room with kids, teachers, kids, and families. Those are the most fun events, I have to say. We're in this together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And learning through play is one of the easiest ways to teach as well. Why do you think there is resistance around learning through play with schools and engaging parents in that process? Because that is such a big opportunity, like what you're doing, to to actually share maths games and different ways to encourage maths at home and learning through play at home, which, as we know, impact cognitive development and the cognitive connections and brain connections that children need to actually process maths information. Why do you
Mm.
think there's resistance around that?
I think it comes back to the perceptions we were talking about before that, I don't know, as a society or a culture, I think we think that play is the opposite of work. And
Okay.
then, maths by
Work
definition
and play.
yeah, yeah. So, and look, I read a really good book a couple of years ago, and I mean, I've been working in the math space now, dedicated to maths for probably 7 or 8 years, and it's only probably been about 3 years that I've really been looking at maths through a play lens. Um, I mean, the word playful was probably there in the back of my mind, but I read a book, actually, I've got it here. It's called Play.
How it
It's
shapes the
called,
brain, yeah.
yeah, Play, How It Shapes the Brain, Opens the Imagination, and Invigorates the Soul. And it's written by Stuart Brown, who's a psychiatrist and a whole bunch of other things. He also founded the National Institute of Play in the US. And this book really unpacks play and helps us to see how it is actually what we do every day. It's important for our survival. It's important for our mental health. And I took a lot of ideas away from this and applied them to my work in the math space. For instance, one of my favorite ideas is well, I call it play preferences. Stuart Brown calls them play personalities, essentially 8 ways to play.
Yeah.
For instance, exploring being one of those. So if you're someone who just loves reading to explore ideas, or perhaps you love exploring the world, you're a traveler. I mean, there are different ways and levels of exploring, but maybe exploring is one of your favorite ways to play. And that one, I mean, that is just so simply applied to mathematics. Let's explore these ideas, let's play with and see what we can find out.
Yeah.
Um, the creating is another one of the 8 favorite ways to play. I love to create, I mean, and that's one of my favorite ways. I love to create presentations that help people understand, about maths play. I love to actually create mathematical art, and mathematical art is something that is becoming more and more featured in the maths play community outreach events and resources. And so this idea that these things that we do, I mean, we have to create for our job sometimes. We have to explore for our job. Storytelling is another of that 8 favorite ways to play. Our writers, our actors, we're all telling stories. I was telling you some stories before and having a nice time, but we're doing all of this, and this is our work, right? Like I'm doing my job, you're doing yours. This is our work, and I mean, I don't know about you, Rachel, but I'm having a lovely time. So this idea that,
Absolutely. Interactions and conversation is part of learning as well, and it's such a fun way to learn
yeah, and
from
I
each
just
other.
don't think that traditionally many of us have had access to social mathematics. I know I never did. It was always a very solitary activity. Like I go to school, you're at your desk, you're doing your work, you go home, you do your homework. I'm in my room on my own, just trying to do my best with my textbook.
Grinding and struggling.
Exactly. And so I mentioned that session that I ran for the parents last week, and how one of those principles, really important aspects, is the visual and concrete mathematics. Well, another really important aspect is social. It needs to be social. We need to have access to talking about mathematics and listening to each other's ideas and seeing that there is more than one way to make sense, and there is more than one way to solve a problem. And that, I would say, that idea of more than one way to solve a problem is probably one of the other really big transformative ideas. Transformative for me, and transformative for everyone that I work with who has previously been disillusioned by maths. But once you say, hey, you don't have to solve 25 plus 26 by stacking them on top of each other, adding the five and the six, putting a one, and then putting, like, you don't have to do it that way.
Yeah.
You could like think about it horizontally, 25 plus 26. You don't even need a pencil and paper probably for that. Like, if you know 25 and 25 is 50, because that might be something that's already in your schema. And then you can just add one more, like, and you've got your answer. You don't need to do it the way that we think we do, which is with pencil and paper and stacking things on top of each other. And I'm not saying that we have to all stop doing that way, but once we have permission to think differently and to be creative when we're solving our everyday maths problems, it actually starts to become quite fun.
Yeah, and how
I mean,
fun would it be to have a session? I'm just picturing a classroom of kids just sitting on the floor, like playing games and having discussions with each other, like really good interactions, which is so needed now. Kids need to learn how to interact properly.
mm,
um, in yeah, listening to each other and hearing each other's perspectives on finding the different answers. And how rich is that for a teacher to facilitate, and where the teacher actually does have to step back a little bit and just facilitate and listen to what their creative brain is picking up on, because that's where all the answers are, in the creative brain.
mm.
And it would be such a fascinating experience, I imagine, for a teacher. But do you think that there are a lot of maths teachers that just cannot get past that type of maths thinking into the creative space? And there's a fear there around not having the specific answers and thinking outside the box.
Yes, I do. And I think that's because we've been living in this framework of quite didactic mathematics. I'm not sure if that's the best word, but where it's like chalk and talk, and we follow the teacher and we do the examples. That sort of and I don't even feel like that's been a normal teaching approach for a number of years, but it seems like we're going back to that a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm just hearing, I'm not in a school at the moment, but I hear from teaching friends and parents about the experiences that are happening in classrooms. And there seems to be a bit of a return in some settings to the chalk and talk, or sorry, the modern version of that being the PowerPoint presentation with about 100 slides is what I'm
Oh
hearing.
no.
Where
Death by PowerPoint.
yeah, death by PowerPoint, exactly, or the PowerPointless presentation is another variation on that. Because what these lessons often lack is relevance to the kids. It's not meaningful. And I'm not
Engaging.
saying I use PowerPoints actually to sometimes guide my lessons and my activities. So I'm not saying we need to do away with PowerPoints at all, but I guess it's the nature of the PowerPoint. Is it where we're doing just repeat, like where it's like we're pouring the kid, like pouring into the children knowledge that we want them to retain? Like, is that what the PowerPoint is doing, or is the PowerPoint getting them to think and
Yeah.
make sense and discuss
Question.
and in question and enjoy, and getting little hits of dopamine when they do get right answers, or when they do know that their reasoning works, for
Yeah.
instance? So yeah, it's interesting to see this shift, and I do wonder a little bit about the role of anxiety playing in that. I think we have, over the last few years, our anxiety seems to have heightened as a sort of education community around how we're going to help the kids that are falling behind. And ironically, you know, things like playful mathematics, so these conversations, the social mathematics, the games, the number talks is a really big one for me. That I would say number talks is a great example of a mathematical routine that is very mathematically rigorous and supports, precision in arithmetic, but in a way that allows the kids to bring their own creativity and their own prior knowledge. So what I described to you before, that idea of having 25 plus 26 written across the board horizontally, so that everyone can be like, oh, well, we don't have to do it a certain way. We can do it whatever way makes sense to us. That's like a number talk scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and I would say one of the best books that I read that helped me on my maths journey as a teacher is called Making Number Talks Matter, and it's by Kathy Humphries and Ruth Parker. And what I love about that book is it really looks at the pedagogical nuances required to make sure that everyone is experiencing psychological safety, because
Yeah.
psychological safety is important at the best of times, but in maths class, it's like it is a real priority because mathematics, I mean, I would argue it's probably one of the most broken parts or broken subjects. We just have maths anxiety is a thing. Maths anxiety amongst primary teachers is a thing. Maths anxiety amongst out of field secondary teachers is a thing. Maths anxiety in families is a big thing.
Yeah.
So that is a really important thing to be aware of and to name it and to say maths anxiety is a thing. We need to be really mindful about the experiences that we're creating for kids. If they're sitting there bored, if they're sitting there feeling hopeless, if they're sitting there distracted by other things because there's just no invitation to think or play or do,
Yeah.
then there's probably a bit of a problem in that setting, and we need to rethink.
Yeah, and how important it is to bring parents into this and families because when my kids were at school, they were introducing a lot of this pedagogy back then. And I remember there was a lot of pushback from parents because they were not teaching rote anymore and they were looking at all different creative ways to teach maths. And there was a fabulous maths leader at the school who really got that parents needed to be engaged in this learning at home. So we created maths bags that kids could take home, and it was just an honor system. And the bags were just full of games that parents could play with their kids that were helping them with their maths brain development. So it was all about cognitive development. And ironically, since then, I've moved into developing cognitive skills in children because I'm so passionate about it. Because I saw it working in our school where parents were so excited to be able to actually understand maths themselves through these games that they were playing with their kids. And it just brought a lot of positivity in perceptions of maths into the home. And it just made such a difference for kids in enjoying maths at school as well. And so it was a flow on effect just through thinking outside the box and thinking, okay, how can we engage parents in play? And the kids are still learning, obviously. As we know, we learn through play, but it's a fun way to connect parents with their kids as well. And then when they come to school, they're excited about maths because they've, shown their parents what they can do. And there's that sense of achievement. So, how do you actually encourage schools to engage parents through play? Is that something that you're looking at doing or that you're currently doing?
So the maths bag is great. We actually had those in the school I taught at for a number of years as well. Kids would take turns at taking them home for a week and then bringing them back. I think there was even like a little book in there where they could write a little entry about what they did and what they discovered or their favorite things. So that's a lovely little initiative. Yeah. Um, so in terms of schools, I mean, there are just so many different ways that you could approach this. But definitely, I think like one thing is when we're setting homework, don't set the kind of stuff that, requires a teacher. I notice that homework that's coming home because friends send me pictures of their maths homework all the time and like and they're like, oh, they're racking their brains and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that that's the homework that you've got for maths because that is really not developmentally appropriate for your child. So, really, if we've got homework, really just checking, is the homework that we're sending home for maths going to develop a love of maths
Mm,
in those kids? Because I think that needs to be an absolute priority. If we don't feel confident and if we don't enjoy a subject, that's when we disengage. That's when we, especially at home, the dynamics are different at home than with a teacher. So the child's probably kicking up all kinds of, like as children, we give our parents more stick than we do our teachers. So to really be mindful about the kinds of activities we're sending home, making sure they're playful,
yeah.
making sure they're not the kind of activity that requires the parent to sit there and kind of make the child do the work.
Homework police.
Homework police, exactly. So that would be a really big one, is making sure whatever goes home can be considered. I like to use the three adjectives: positive, playful, and empowering or powerful.
Yeah.
And so positive just being, there's no way that this can go wrong. Like it's a game, or
Yeah.
it's a game that you play. There's no real wrong answer. There might be some, you've got to get some right answers to play the game, but it's not as if you're going to be marked on this. It's positive, it's safe. Playful, meaning, you've got these elements, maybe there's a social element in there, exploring things that we do when we play, experimenting.
Yeah.
One or two of those play verbs could be involved. And it doesn't even need to be a game. It could just be one problem. But the idea is that as a family, you sit down and you each come up with a different way of solving that problem. And that's your homework. Like you share that, you discuss it. It doesn't need to be, you know, play in terms of the famous play, which is games and free play. It can be just be playful by bringing in social elements. But yeah, so homework is one thing, and then there's all sorts of other things, I suppose. I mean, I know some classrooms have open mornings where parents come in, or grandparent days where they come in and they play maths games in the classroom.
Yeah.
That's just something that they do every year as part of their big picture of the curriculum.
Yeah.
I know, after school things as well, like after school afternoons, so that people can come after work. But yeah, another thing that's sort of gaining a little bit of interest or momentum in the community I'm a part of is the ideas of maths parties at home. So, like, have some friends over for a maths party and we'll play some games that have been
Yeah. That's
provided either
a
by the
good idea.
school or, yeah, or provided by, like, I mean, I off through Mass Plays Community Outreach am able to sort of recommend certain games for certain age groups and stuff, or activities. So that idea of really shifting maths from a solitary subject where we have to individually struggle to a social outlet, I think is a really, because it is, I mean, speak to mathematicians. They'll say, yeah, it's collaborative, it's social, like we work together, but
Yeah.
that's just not been the experience for, for many of
That's
us
cool.
who, yeah, exactly. So really, really focusing on that, I would say. I mean, there's a bunch of things, but really visual, playful, and social mathematics. Really thinking about it through that lens, and there's so much available in terms of help and resources. So it's
Yeah.
not as if we need to figure out how to do it. All of the resources are there. It's more the awareness to know what we need to be doing differently.
Yeah, definitely. That awareness. And I guess that's what you're doing in your work is to create awareness out in the community. Can you tell me a little bit more about your community outreach work and your Maths Play website?
Thank you for asking. Yeah, Mass Play is a labor of love. It's very much a community research project that's been sort of, I guess we've been up for maybe 3 years now. But I mean, mathsplay.org is where you can go to read a little bit more about some of the philosophy and pedagogy that I or we as a community are playing with, exploring, and enjoying. So there's a blog at mathsplay.org. There's also a place where you can, like resources, you can sign up and you get an email with a little welcome pack. It's like a free resources. We're all about spreading the love. um, and a few projects are on the go at the moment. So I'm not doing a lot of work with schools and families right now. Usually sometimes I'll go into schools and work with schools as a floating maths fairy where I come in
A
and
floating maths fairy.
yeah, so that's one of our
I
maths
love
play
that.
initiatives. So I'll come in and work with the teacher, and we'll just whatever it is that they want to see more of in their classroom, and whatever maths concepts. And then I tend to come in character and run with
Oh,
the
that's
kids
so
a
fun.
lesson. Yeah, so I mean, I think that's really important for teachers because we are motivated to do the best we can
Yeah.
to serve the students in front of us. But if we haven't seen a different way of teaching mathematics, or if we haven't experienced it, it's very difficult. So that's why programs like this, I think, are really important. And there are other people who go into classrooms and model, and that's quite a common approach for professional learning in schools.
Yeah.
Um, And then on the family side, I do a little bit of tutoring, but those programs are on hold at the moment because I'm currently working on collaboratively with a few colleagues slash friends on some new programs and actually a new community project, which is about more than mathematics.
Yeah.
It's about serving incredibly creative teachers, learners, and their families in a time where we're experiencing a really serious mental health crisis, which has been caused by the education crisis. Like there's this relationship
Mm.
between schooling that doesn't suit certain incredibly creative learners and their families. This
Yeah.
is why we've got like a homeschooling explosion, not by choice. There
Yeah.
was a really good, a very educational episode about this on Four Corners last year in April. So just exploring this. So I know like I'm getting a little bit off the maths topic at the moment, but just to sort of make you aware that um, there's more going on around maths play than just mathematics, and playful mathematics is a really important part of catering to incredibly creative learners, teachers, and families.
Yeah.
But at the moment, yeah, so I'm sort of kind of on a sabbatical from maths play just while working on setting up this other project,
Is
which
that
is
a
a more
research project?
there is going to be research involved. We're going to be speaking with a lot of families because I think one of the things that's missing from a lot of our conversations about education, mass education and education generally is we're not really hearing from kids. You know, we often sit around and we say, oh, we should be teaching this way and we should be teaching that way and here are the reasons why. But I'm not hearing a lot of voices from kids and families. And
Mm.
that's why I really appreciated that Four Corners episode last year in April. It's called The Kids Who Can't for anyone who's interested.
I'm definitely interested.
Yes,
Watching
and it really opened my eyes just to just how serious things are across Australia for many families.
40,000 plus students, I think now, and counting, and that's only the children we know about.
Yeah, absolutely. And,
Yeah.
and and you've hit on something there because we've got those who can't go to school and whose families are at home supporting the learning at home, but we've also got kids who are still going to school, but they do not feel safe. So
And they don't learn.
they're in a constant state of sort of anxiety or vigilance or what have you. So as you say, you know, we've also got the many. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
without sort of going off on another whole tangent here, but that is something really important that's going on alongside maths play at the moment, and maths play activities are on hold. But typically, we run community outreach events, intergenerational events, inviting teachers, families, and kids.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have events that are just for teachers, sometimes events just for family adults, sometimes just for kids. But we really like to have intergenerational events I don't know what the best word is, but you know, every all inclusive events so that we can all be part of this conversation together. Because, you know, many of the teachers that are coming and reaching out for things, you know, we're all in the same boat as the kids and the family adults, you know, like we are still discovering what mathematics can and should feel like. So, and we can do that together. I'm not sure if that
Yeah.
really answers your question,
No,
but yeah,
it's
there's a few
essential,
things going on.
essential to do it together because we're all in this together.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no. Can you tell me a little bit more about it sounds like you are so passionate about that project, and I can't wait to hear more about it. But you're just about to start a podcast as well. Can you tell
Mm.
me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I think you're aware that we Maths Play did a podcast last year called Four Sevens. So that is actually available for anyone who wants to listen to existing podcasts on the website. And that was exploring the positive, playful, and empowering nature of mathematics by interviewing different people that work in the maths space, including and not limited to mathematicians. I think it's just so important that we have mathematicians involved in conversations about maths education because there are a lot of very passionate mathematicians out there who are quite upset actually that their discipline has been dumbed down in the way that it has in schools.
Okay.
You know, in some settings or in that sort of industrial model of maths education. And, you know, it's taking time to really correct and fix and shift that. But yeah, a new podcast is in the works. The working title is A Kind Education. So this is a more broader perspective. It's not just mathematics, but I'm sure mathematics will be featured and it will come up every now and then because it is such an important area when we're thinking about kind and unkind sort of education experiences. Kind and unkind pedagogy is something that I've been reading about and discussing with people and reflecting on. But this podcast isn't really going to be about too much about teaching. It's going to speak more generally. So the first interviews with Australia's leading social researcher, Hugh McKay.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
yes, so we were talking about that's episode one. We were talking about his some of the ideas in his two latest books. So the 2021, he wrote The Kindness Revolution, and last year he wrote The Way We Are, Lessons from a Lifetime of Listening. And so that was a really great conversation, and that will be coming out hopefully in the next couple of months. But just as long as I'm on track with all the editing and things, and then there'll be another 5 episodes to follow that with different interviewing different people that have a really good grounding in a certain area of knowledge and expertise and lived experience and a lot of experience. So I'm very excited and really feel very privileged to have been able to secure some really great speakers for those episodes.
Yeah, no, that sounds fantastic. I'll just pop a link down underneath this video for people to find it. Is it on Spotify?
Well, Four Sevens is on Spotify already. This one will be on Spotify when it's published. I mean, it will be on various platforms. Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's been fascinating to talk with you today, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I think we could talk about this all day because it's obviously a passion of yours to, to see children enjoying their education again at school and particularly in the maths space as well. And I think the work that you're doing is so needed. And I'm equally as passionate about that as well, and making sure that families are engaged in the learning and being able to experience the school journey in a positive way. And obviously, yeah, teachers want to have positive experiences as well, and to feel supported in their work to be able to teach maths and other subjects and to support their students. And so I just want to thank you for your amazing work, and hopefully this project comes to fruition. And I can't wait to hear your podcast as well to learn from the likes of Hugh Mackay, and I'm sure you've got some other amazing guests to talk about how we need to shift our perspective in education. And I think what it comes back to really is relationships. And really, like you said several times in this session, is just about being social and learning how to be social again, and learning how to be together, interact together, and learn from each other, and not be so set in our ways to be able to explore new ways to do things and to be creative and get back to what our souls need, really. And that is, those interconnected relationships and creativity and play, and just to have fun.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Life doesn't have to
wonderful.
be so hard.
That's right. It's actually not that difficult to enjoy mathematics once you know how. It's just having someone like a positive maths mentor help you find that way and open that door. So,
Yeah.
yeah, no, thank you. It's been lovely to chat with you. And likewise, I think all the work you're doing is wonderful, and I really enjoy following your podcast. So it's what a joy to be invited on and have a chat with you. It's just been a
Absolute pleasure.
joy. Yeah.
Well, what another inspiring interview in our Leadership in Education series of our Creating Connections podcast. If you enjoyed this interview and would like to learn more from other leaders in education, please click on the subscribe button to receive further podcasts on your feed. If you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, click on the link below to book a meeting with me to learn more about you and your leadership in education. Or if you're listening to this podcast, send an email to rachel@practicallylearning.com.au to express your interest in being on the podcast. If you are a school leader or teacher with aspirations for leadership, but you're challenged with self-doubt, overwhelm, and whether you have what it takes to take that next step, our Connect with Your Mind Mastery Coaching Program can support you to work on your own self-mastery to become the leader you aspire to be. For further information about our coaching and professional learning programs, please visit our website at practicallylearning.com.au or click on one of the links below and visit our podcast for our future series of interviews to support you as the adults who are guiding children on their learning journey. I do hope you enjoy the rest of our episodes on our Creating Connections podcast, and I hope to meet you soon.